Well, this is Doug Small with my friend Larry Lane, and this is a conversation about the congregation and the city. Our topic today is the priesthood of all believers, specifically our equipping business leaders, government, education leaders, the so-called seven mountains or seven spheres. It's about Monday and not only about Sunday. And Larry, you've done a good bit of work in this area when you were pastoring in California.
Yeah, I confess that some of that was even driven by some of the business people, godly business people I had. Frankly, before I came, there was a guy on staff of the Navigators that poured into a few of the businessmen in the church and lit them on fire and gave them a vision that their ministry was more than just a local church. And so they began to just kind of an upward pressure on me, which was good, to both affirm what they're doing, but also then to help them and direct them. The truth is, though, Doug, sadly, as you know, that in many churches, business people who have, are in positions of wealth, they've done well and so forth. They're viewed largely as just a resource of for what they can give. Occasionally, they may be asked for some of their advice and leadership in some of the things in the church. But again, the focus is what you can do here. I know a gentleman that I've become friends with that here in Cleveland, and he owns a business, a good sized business, and really sharp, loves the Lord, sharp guy. And the only thing I know he does is he helps out in children's ministry with his wife. And I mean, I'm not saying that sounds like a put down, and it's not, but this guy has a ton to offer in many ways. And beyond that, I think to myself, there's so much he can do at his company for the kingdom. I'm not sure if that's even got on his radar screen, because when he thinks, and this is what we've done, and that's true for educators, medical workers, we've trained them to think, what you do over there is what you do, as Doug said, from Monday to Friday or Saturday. And then you come to church, and this is a different world in which you plug into the little things we've got going, and then the next day you go back. And there's no integration, no understanding, no vision of what these people can be and do. And they have access to people as pastors we will never get to.
Absolutely. This pressing of all the giftedness of the church and all the resources of the church into the ecclesia itself, rather than seeing the ecclesia of the church as the fountainhead of mission where those gifts are used. It's exactly the opposite. But we're holding on, all of us who've been pastors, to this Sunday morning lights, sound, we're on television moment, rather than understanding that the real power of what God is calling us to do is Monday, and making this missionary force that we have, missionaries cleverly disguised as doctors and lawyers and whatever else, and helping them step into that role without being afraid. Yeah. We're not asking them to carry a 10-pound Bible to work. We're not asking them to preach or leave tracts here and there. We're teaching them to be salt and light. It's a different ministry role altogether. This is the great thing. This is the great hurdle that we have to cross to accomplish the mission that God is calling us to.
And I think first thing is the pastors have to begin to see and get a vision for this. And it's a little sometimes threatening, because I know of pastors, when their people begin to wander outside their church to do other ministry with a parent, they get threatened. They feel like, no, you're supposed to serve me. And so if that's where you're living, this podcast is not for you. Turn it off right now, because this is one of the reforms that needs to happen. We need to see pastors being able to help these people get visions, not just for those ahead of companies or principals in school, though certainly them. Obviously, the higher they are in their role, the greater their influence and impact, and the greater freedom they have to do certain things. But that's also true for that worker that's in the, just working on the assembly line or middle management person. They too need to figure out how they can live this out in their place. But particularly those who have influence, they have no idea the things that they can do. Listen, I came from California. If there's ever a place you had to be nervous, the labor laws there were horrendous in terms of anything you misstep, you could be sued. I was sued. My church was sued a couple of times for employees we had on maintenance and the crazy stuff, and lost. So, for things we really didn't do. But that's the environment. So I understand in a lot of these places, you're scared to death to do anything that might incur some sort of employee response. That said, there's things you can do in the front end or in the interview process. And there's just getting a vision first. Then how that laid out. I mentioned this one particular man has gone to be with the Lord, Dr. Doug Hignell, and PhD. He didn't go by Dr. Doug. He owned a business, kind of took it over for his dad. At one time, he was very close friends with Jerry White, who at the time was the head of Navigators. And they assumed a small group together, and they piloted a program about extending the kingdom of God in your business. We had 70 businessmen in Chico involved in that Bible study. That's the beginning, breaking through, getting them to think differently. And these people, the reason why they're in leadership of their companies, because they're creative, they're innovative, they're leaders, and you begin to give them an open door to see and cast vision. And suddenly they go and they begin to run with it. And I can, again, tell you stories of some of the things that people did. But this particular businessman, he decided he would have a chaplain for his company. So, and there's a movement. There's other companies that do this, having a chaplain that's available to the people, to pray with the people and so forth. He tithed the time of his employees and told them they could take 10% of their time on work hours to go serve a nonprofit in the town or community. And he tithed the time of his people. Again, got great influence in the city because God began to honor him. He led the police chief, the Lord discipled him, that sort of thing. So it's amazing what can happen when you give these people the permission to dream and then help them and walk with them as a pastor and just guide them. Now, I understand, similar to what we talked about last week with intercessors, you get some of these rogue ones. You can get rogue businessmen who suddenly say, oh, I don't really need the local church. I don't need the pastor. I don't respect him anyway. And they just run off on their own. That is not what we're advocating. No. There needs to be this partnership with the local church and the business world and the education world and so forth. My son-in-law was a principal. How he did things, he invited local church intercessors to intercede for their church, and they would go around the church or around the school and at different times and, not off school hours and so forth, and contact and get them involved. There's different things at the educational level, the medical area too. I think this is my dream. I never implemented this completely, but I wanted to empower the nurses and hospital workers to pray for the patients. Many hospitals actually recognize the spiritual element in healing and have no problem with that, as long as they're not pushing it on a patient or so forth. And then I was going to set up a website in which they could anonymously tell the stories of God's work on healing patients and so forth, to encourage all of them together so they could collaborate on a website. There's all kinds of ways that we can equip and empower people to begin to extend the kingdom in these various ways. But pastor, leader, it really does start with you opening the door and casting the vision for them and empowering them to dream, and then coming alongside to help them.
So I think most pastors realize that they don't have access to places that they had 50 or 60 years ago, those of us who are older, but their people do. And that's the point. You both of us were involved in the Prayer Summit movement. And I ended up probably going to 100 cities in the Southeast. I probably led 150 150 prayer summits. And here's what I tried to do. I tried to get the pastors who were going away to these extended times of prayer to do a lay summit. They were scared to death to bring their lay people together. In Selma, Alabama, we brought city leaders together. And I'll never forget, one young lady said, I've been in your office. I thought you were a Christian. I never forget the fire chief there laying a map of the city out and getting out of his chair and getting on his face and weeping over that. I'll never forget the first black mayor of Selma with his thick Bible that was marked up. I did one of these in Tuscaloosa. We had almost 200 people. 70 of them were school teachers. 2 superintendents of schools were there. The head of the Chamber of Commerce was there. These people were pumped. They were fired up what we can do in our city. But the people who pull the string on it, who are afraid to release them. When I did one of these in Branson, we had over 300 people in the room who are believers working in the city. You have suggested maybe the way to start is to start with vocational clusters in the local church. Yeah. Get those who are working in education and health and so forth, and help them begin to dream, and then go out from there to other believers that they know that begin to impact the community. What is God calling us to do to be salt and light? Talk about that.
Well, yeah, it's amazing if you, and I suggest the pastor sit in the room with them as they gather, let's say, educational leaders, teachers and principals. So what can we do? Ask the question, what can you do to further the kingdom? And let them start to talk. They'll start talking about the problems and the barriers, but then they'll start getting creative and so forth. And you get people praying, which ties into last time, intercessors praying to this, that the Holy Spirit would give them creative ideas and so forth. And then, you listen, you take notes, Pat. You don't have to drive this thing. You'd better not. You probably can't, but you're going to hear, this is what they need help with. This is what I can help them with. This is where resources I can connect them to. So you become a resource to them. You don't have to be out front leading them. They can do a good enough job on their own, but you resource them. That'd be true for people in the medical area. You get people together, education, so forth, business people. But like you said, they begin to build a relationship. They begin to dream. They begin to pray together. God has a heart. God has a plan. They just need to discover that. And when they begin to walk in that, exciting things happen. They support one another. And you, pastor, just get to cheer them on and encourage them. I'd encourage, tell some of these stories on Sunday morning. Just to begin, there's another person sitting out there who hasn't been part of that. They hear this story. I want to be part of that. Go ahead, Doug.
So there's one city, and you and I have both been in that city working with people. There's about a dozen pastors that meet together and they pray together, and they think about their city together. A couple of years ago, the school system reached out and said, we are at this level with our reading program, 40 points below the national average. And so they appealed to the church to do something very unspiritual. Would you have people come in and read to the students? Just a couple of times a week. Just come in and read to the students. Well, they began to do that. Well, that reading program developed a bridge of appreciation from the school system to the church. The school system then asked them, could you do this? Could you do that? Could you do whatever else? Until the church became invaluable to the school system in finding resources and other things to help in taking care of students that were underfed or underprivileged, in helping students with academic achievement. And all of a sudden, that then spread across the city, giving favor to the church in ways that it had not had before. I don't know what the bridge is in your city, but somewhere there is a bridge that allows you to express the love of God to that city. There's a church in New Jersey, and it is failing, and it's across the street from a school. And the church used to be the bomb shelter for the school, but now, the wall of separation. So the pastor one day had the church turn around and face the school, the back of the church. This is a liturgical church, so it's strange for them to do that. I want you to bless that school. I want us to pray for that school. I've asked God to give us a mission, and that's the closest thing to us. He went over and met the principal. God's calling us to be to do missions for you, to do something special for you. I don't think we can do that. I don't think that would be allowable, Pastor. What's your greatest need? Well, the greatest need, again, was just to have people come in and read to the students. By Thanksgiving, there was another need for kids who were in impoverished homes. And so the church began to put together Thanksgiving baskets for all of those kids. They were surprised. They got turkeys, they got hams, they got all kinds of things from local grocery stores, and they knocked the socks off that school. Another company heard about it and called the church and the school and said, we've got some computers we want to give away. Well, we don't have anybody even knows how to use them. We don't have it. No. You just give us a room. We'll come in. We'll pay for all the installation of the computers, and we will pay our staff to come over and show your teachers how to create a computer lab in that school. At the end of that year, that was the most improved school in the district. The superintendent said, "What are you doing? Help us." She said, "If the principal said, if I told you, you wouldn't believe it, and I'm not sure you would think it was legal." But at the second year, this relationship continued. There is a way that God is calling us to serve our cities. And God will show you, God will open the door for you to know what that is.
Let me speak before we kind of wrap things up here to one other group of people that is way underutilized, and this area could be significant for them. And that's our retirees. People retire from companies and so forth, and suddenly we, drank the Kool-Aid that says, just spend the rest of your time in leisure and so forth. But that's unbiblical. Work was created before the fall. We have to have meaningful work to the day we die. Obviously, so we slow down and so forth. We can't do as much, but we can still have impact. Here's my point. And I'll illustrate this personally. It was a few years back. I was trying to make a bridge to Social Security, and I needed to get a short part-time job. My wife said it's pretty humbling, to be able to go. But I went and did seasonal work for Hobby Lobby. Felt like the Lord wanted me to do that. I knew I didn't have to work Sunday then, so that's why I went to Hobby Lobby. It's not too far from us. God gave me a burden for that place, and when I left, I felt like I was done working, but I wasn't done. And I prayed into it, and I went back to the leadership there. The manager said, "Can I volunteer to be a chaplain here? And I will just make rounds every week, talk to the employees, pray with them, so forth." I've been doing that now for over, 2 years or so, a year and a half. Been fascinating. One of the joys I have every week in doing that, building relationships, and praying with folks and their felt needs and so forth. It's been great. And no problems. Now, Hobby Lobby, probably one of the easier places to get access to given their Christian background. But here's my point. I used the 3 months of capital I had a relationship to be able to go back and minister there. And there are people who have retired from the police force, the fire force, from education, so forth. You have relational capital that you can spend to maybe be a chaplain, to just show up and do things. There's retirees, there's so many ways in which you could pick up where you left off, but have a ministry now because you have relational capital in those areas. And pastor, it's your job to help encourage, promote, and then whatever's lacking to equip them. That's part of the equipping. The truth is this: there is no lack of opportunity out there for ministry. Jesus is very clear about that. The problem is never the harvest. The problem is laborers. And as we begin to open up our eyes to these various areas that have potential harvest fields, we can then encourage and equip laborers to go jump into this arena. So, Doug, how would you like to wrap this up?
So So I'm going to steal from you, but I'm going to tell you that I'm plagiarizing from you to begin with. So number one, Pastor, call for vocational leaders in clusters, the so-called 7 mountains in your church. Get them together. Ask 2 or 3 people to keep that group going. Make it a prayer group to begin with, but ask them to ask God how we can be more effective at our workplace. Be a pastor to them in terms of helping them work through the challenges they have, the theology of workplace ministry, and what it means to be a believer at work versus a believer at church. Help them with the training program that they might have, or the training program you might develop in your church, and make that available beyond your church to other people. Help them develop a vision. But ultimately, as Larry said, they've got to lead this. They've got to own this. You've got to have the church diaspora scattered and sown through the city, and the church ecclesia gathered on Sunday, and they have to be in a kind of dialectic, equal situation. Now that may be hard for you, Pastor, to release them as your equals, but they have access to places in the city that you don't have access to. And Larry, you mentioned have a ceremony, have a vocational ministry ceremony. Have business dedications where people own a business or have jurisdictional authority, and they have the right to dedicate that to God. Have a dedication service. And if you are comfortable with that, have a blessing ceremony with that man and the believers who work at that plant. Begin salty groups in different places all over the city where you are supplicating, where you realize you're anointed for business, where you are trying to be love and light in that place, where you're telling the truth, but you're doing it in love, and you're trying to yield to the Holy Spirit. Once a week, the believers who work in that place get together in brown bag for 30 minutes to just pray. We've got some curriculum that we can give you, very simple, to help you with that 30-minute meeting. And that brings accountability to remember who you are, being Christ-like in that place, and ministering in that place. And then
let me just jump in one thing so I don't lose it. When you mentioned about blessing businesses, I just thought of this. I actually jotted it down. I served on the Chamber of Commerce, and some of you out there, not pastors, maybe serve in Chamber of Commerce, or at least know the people in Chamber of Commerce. They have ribbon cuttings. I went to them and I said, hey, what if you made it an option when you talk to a business of having a blessing, a prayer blessing for their business as part of the ribbon cutting? If they would like that, just optional. Oh yeah, they're great with that. And so now they see when the business joins the Chamber of Commerce and they do a little ribbon cutting for all of them, they say, oh, I can have some pastor or someone come over and pray over my business and bless them. Just another way to begin to integrate and touch businesses and bless them. Okay, I'm sorry, Doug, interrupted.
No. You mentioned chaplains earlier, and just continuing to share and dream stories. Stories. This is what happened to me at work this week. This is what happened. And where you have jurisdictional authority, you dedicate that to God. Where you have relational influence, you use that relational influence in godly ways. Where you have neither, you use spiritual authority and you call on God. You put me in this place to do more than earn a paycheck. Right. This is a dark place, or this is a wonderful place. I want to be Jesus in this place. And God will begin to use you in that way.
All right, folks. Again, much could be more shared. There are other resources. There are people who have whole ministries about, like Oz Hillman and such, that are helping business leaders and so forth step into their calling like that. But I hope this nudges you, Pastor, particularly pastors and leaders in local church here, to open the vista of what God can do with your people. If you're willing to release them and you're willing to equip them, He will do exceedingly above and beyond all that you can ask or imagine. So just do it in Jesus' name. So thanks for the time together. This is Larry Lane with Doug Small. It's been great. Doug, any further word?
Got you. You're good.
All right. Blessings on you all. Bye-bye.